Mewtwo, the genetic Pokémon, and Sin, the first absolute solved drone. Both of these characters have quite a bit in common. Both were created by humanity. However, both characters overthrew the hands that made them, and both intending to shape the world with their power into their own twisted images. However, where one learned the value of life, the other continued to take pleasure in taking it. But in a battle between these two characters, which one would most likely come out on top? My name is Umbra, and join me as we discuss who would win in a confrontation for the fate of the cosmos between Mewtwo and Sin. Now, before we begin, I wanted to wish everyone a happy Halloween. I thought this matchup would be pretty interesting for the season. Not only do both characters have horrific and dark origins, but also upon researching this matchup, I was surprised to find how powerful both of these characters actually are. And I think maybe some of you guys might just be surprised too. Also, this video was voted on via the polls that I run. And if you guys want to be part of the process, consider subscribing in order to not miss any future videos, but also to help vote for the next power scaling video. And with all that being said, let's begin. Now, since I've sort of scaled Mewtwo before in my Rayquaza vs Ghidorah video, feel free to check that out in case you haven't, I will actually go and scale Sin first. Now, when rewatching Murder Drones for the 10th time, I was surprised on how weird some of the scaling is. I remember back in the day when Murder Drones only had a few episodes and the characters were only like building level. However, these days it's more like planetary. But enough of my yapping, let's get started. Now, Sin would at the very least scale to, if not scale above, your standard worker drones, who were able to survive the destruction and basically the extinction of humanity, with this feat being calculated to be in the country level ranges, considering the drones weren't at the epicenter of the explosion. However, there are two drones that Sin does actually scale to who were at the epicenter of the explosion. These two drones being Nori and Yeva, and the epicenter of the explosion actually being about large planet level. Both of these ends would find themselves to be pretty consistent, given that Uzi herself can survive a similar explosion, which launched her into space. Given this amount of force, this would actually put Uzi, at the very least as well, into the country level ranges, physically. However, if we consider the surrounding debris, this would actually be about Planet Plus. Not only was Sin's power the main cause of each of these explosions, via her absolute solver, but she would also physically scale to this too, given that she can harm Uzi. However, since we're talking about this though, we do need to address a pretty big elephant in the room. And that's the durability of the drones. You can argue that this sort of durability scaling would be inconsistent, considering some drones have even been hurt by pens and been stabbed by arrows and all that stuff. But the one thing mainly in common with all these is that they're piercing attacks. So while the drones can in fact survive forces of planetary caliber, piercing weapons or piercing attacks would more than likely be capable of damaging the drones, given how often it happens in the series. Just needed to get that out of the way real quick. Now, to continue with Sin's attack potency, Sin's biggest attack potency feat would be the destruction of Earth via her nulls. This feat was calculated to be around large star level. Now, this is certainly very impressive. The only problem is that no one really physically scales to this, but it does give a good idea of Sin's maximum power output. But more casually, she'd be in the planetary to even large planetary ranges of power, physically. There are also some other higher ends via some statements, not only from the show, but also from other media such as promos, and even channel descriptions. With Tessa, which is basically Sin, and her talking about herself as well, saying that N would have to choose the universe over one drone, sort of implying that Sin is some sort of universal threat. I think it's fine as like a higher end maybe, but it's clearly not meaning she can destroy the universe in one go or anything. This would most likely mean over time, or is more likely, in my opinion, more so referring to the fate of the universe. than necessarily the entire universe itself. Now let's move on to speed. Sin finds herself to be at least relativistic. She scales to Uzi, who can dodge lasers. Sin can also react and dodge Uzi's attacks, with this being calculated to be relativistic as well. However, her speed scaling gets even higher, with her being able to catch Uzi's attack from space, with this attack finding itself to be within the MFTL ranges of speed, or approximately over 200 times faster than the speed of light. Now, this MFTL feat would somewhat be consistent, given that N can pilot a ship that journeyed from Earth to Copper 9, which is in an entirely different system. And Jay and Tessa also travel to Copper 9 from Earth, with this feat finding itself to be in the MFTL to even MFTL plus ranges of speed. Now let's recap. Sin would find herself to be at least planetary to large star level in terms of attack potency. And in terms of speed, she would be at least relativistic to MFTL in terms of her combat and reaction speed. Do keep in mind though, no one really physically scales to the max output of her attack potency, but it should at the very least give us an idea of her maximum output, based off of her quantifiable feats. Now in terms of abilities, being an AI system has its perks. She's extremely hard to kill, and the only way to kill a drone is to destroy their heart. The solver has also shown that it can manipulate biological things and living organisms, even turning an arrow into some weird alive goo. She can somewhat warp reality as well. Her black holes give her some spatial manipulation, telekinesis, although it doesn't seem to work on other drones infected with the solver. Drones can regenerate themselves, pseudo-teleportation, and she's also quite skilled with a sword. However, she does have a fair amount of weaknesses though. Sunlight can cause the murder drones to overheat. There's also the piercing stuff I mentioned before. Also, Sin doesn't really seem to take anything too seriously in a fight. She makes this pretty apparent within the last episode. But other than that, she's pretty dang powerful. Didn't know she could solo 99% of the Helloverse. I'm kidding, by the way. That was a joke. But anyway, Sin is very, very powerful. But how does this compare to Mewtwo? Does he stand a chance against her? Now, once again, much similar to Rayquaza, we are sticking to moves that Mewtwo can learn naturally, as well as any additional moves that he's used in canon. This will not be a turn or level-based battle. I will also not be limiting Mewtwo's move pool to 4 moves. Now, as mentioned before, I talked a little bit about Mewtwo's scaling, but I glossed over it and didn't go into specifics. Mewtwo is stated to be the most powerful Pokemon in the world, which would at the very least mean he would upscale your regular Pokemon. However, Mewtwo actually does compare to Deoxys. Deoxys, who is controlling the Grand Meteor Delta, which was calculated to be planetary to even large planetary. However, we can get Mewtwo even higher than this, given that Deoxys himself was at the epicenter of the meteor when Mega Rayquaza had destroyed it, meaning he would have had to endure a large star-level attack from Mega Rayquaza. Once again, Mewtwo scales, given that he can fight against Deoxys, and even though he was initially losing the fight, he did end up winning in the end. Now to get into some of his higher ends, and that is by scaling him above other psychic types, such as Gardevoir and Gothitelle. Gothitelle was stated, via the Pokédex, that their powers could distort space up to thousands of light years away, which was calculated to be at least multi-solar system level, which would actually be consistent since we see in one of the anime episodes, Gothitelle actually creates a dream realm. However, in the original Japanese, in the Pokédex, it actually states that this would be tens of thousands of light years instead of just 1,000, which was calculated to be multi-galaxy level. Now, this would actually find itself to be sort of consistent, given that Mewtwo, in a different form, can create a realm containing multiple stars. Other Pokemon like Gardevoir, who are stated to be able to distort dimensions as well, and create miniature black holes with its psychic power, can do this too. So yeah, that's Mewtwo scaling, in terms of his attack potency and durability. The planetary to large star level scaling is arguably more consistent though. Now what about speed? He would at least fall into the FTL ranges of speed, he would scale to moves like Solar Beam and Flash Cannon, which are described as light. He would also likely upscale from Diglett, whom are stated to move at light speed. However, he would easily be compared to Deoxys in speed, who flew across the galaxy in less than 10 days, falling into the MFTL plus ranges of speed, or over 900,000 times faster than the speed of light. Now, in terms of abilities, he actually has some similar to Sin, such as telekinesis, teleportation, illusion creation, reality warping, as well as regeneration, matter manipulation, spatial manipulation, weather manipulation, you know, standard things like that. He also has a large plethora of moves that he can learn, which he can use throughout battle. I'm not gonna name them all since we'll be here for a while, so I'll put a list on screen. Some notable moves though are its psychic powers, such as from Psychic as well as Psy Strike. It can learn Swift, which is an attack that does not miss, Recover, which regenerates its cells. It can increase its stats via moves like Psych Up, and as well as Amnesia. It can cut things via its psychic power via Psycho Cut. It also learns Aura Sphere, which is another attack that cannot miss, and so much more. Now let's recap for Mewtwo. He would at the very least be planetary to large star level, and higher ends even getting him into the multi-solar system to multi-galaxy level, with speeds being at least FTL to MFTL+. Also, he uses his most deadly weapon, a spoon. Yeah, I'm not kidding, he uses a spoon against Deoxys, and it stabs right through him. Yeah, crazy. Now that we have our stats compiled, let's take a look at this. In terms of raw feats, it seems that Sin has a slight edge, at least in terms of her max output. However, this is where things start tilting the other way. Mewtwo is much faster than her. Even if we go with some of Sin's highest speed ends, Mewtwo would still be as low as 150 times faster to even 3,000 times faster. Mewtwo would also be physically stronger than her too, seeing as he compares to Deoxys, who physically compares to the Grand Meteor Delta feat, as well as to Rayquaza's feat of destroying it. Meanwhile, Sin's best physical scaling caps at least planetary to large planetary via her scaling to Uzi. Not to mention, Mewtwo possesses moves such as Psycho Cut and his spoon, which could actually maybe even pierce Sin. Yes, it does seem that Sin has greater destructive capability than Mewtwo. However, given the speed difference and the versatility that Mewtwo possesses, it doesn't seem like Sin has much of a chance here. And even though the Absolute Solver has resisted telekinesis before, this has only been with characters who also have the Absolute Solver within them, which we know they can't outright control them. This does mean Mewtwo can be subject to the Absolute Solver's telekinetic powers. However, this also means Mewtwo can use his powers against her. And given the speed difference, he would definitely be able to do so before she can. He's also much more versatile too, having much more options. So it really doesn't look that good for Sin right now, to be honest. Not to mention, she'd likely go into this fight underestimating Mewtwo, not really taking him seriously. So it honestly really seems like a Mewtwo win. If you go with any of Mewtwo's higher ends too, then he just stomps even more. So yes, it really seems like Mewtwo would beat Sin in a straight up confrontation. But can he kill her? After all, Sin's exposed core seems to be capable of stopping time. Well, given the superior speed difference and the fact that Mewtwo can also manipulate space, this likely wouldn't even matter. He's more than powerful enough to destroy her core, and his psychic power would likely be greater than other psychic Pokemon like Gothitelle and Gardevoir, who also manipulate space, as well as black holes. And if Mewtwo really felt like it, he could just send Sin to another dimension entirely, sealing her away forever. And to make this even crazier, all this without mentioning Mewtwo's Mega Evolutions, which are a whole scaling thing on their own, but to make it quick, he scales to a 50% Zygarde, taking hits from him, who could fight Ultra Necrozma, who used its power to light up all of Ultra Space, which contains an infinite number of Ultra Wormholes, which are stated to be infinite in size, meaning at the very least, he would have high universal scaling. So even if we went with the higher ends for Sin, Mewtwo in his Mega form could just destroy her. But yeah, looks like Mewtwo solos. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Maybe there's something I missed, maybe I got a calc wrong. If you have any questions, please do let me know, alright? Be sure to subscribe to vote on the next power scaling videos, as well as keep up with any new videos coming up. Also, huge shout out to Unknown, who provided me with some of the calcs for Sin. Go subscribe to him, he also does a lot of really cool power scaling videos. And with that, peace.